Today we're gonna finish what we started. Essentially, we got the heads bolted on. Now we just need to torque a few things down. I need to do the valve adjustment on it and button everything up, put the timing belt on, and we should be fully buttoned up by the end of this video, and then hopefully we can start dropping in this block into the Forester. It's been way too long, guys. Let's get it done. If you guys watched the last video, you know we left off at the valve adjustment. What I will say about the valve adjustment is it's a little bit strange because they tell you what the specs are. So the intake is 20 millimeters plus or minus 0.02 millimeters, and then the exhaust valves are 25 millimeters plus or minus 0.02 millimeters. Now, what I will say is a bit strange is they tell you there's supposed to be a slight drag on the feeler gauge. However, when you actually do this, a slight drag is kind of ambiguous. You don't really know, okay, is this a slight drag? Is it too tight? You don't really know, so you kind of have to trust yourself. Another way to check this is to use a slightly bigger or slightly smaller feeler gauge. I would always err on the tighter side, but again, that's just kind of my opinion. And additionally to that, with the valve adjustment, the exhaust rocker arms are also super strange. So each cylinder has one exhaust rocker arm, and to get the adjustment between one side and the other for just one cylinder was kind of a trial and error task, because I would adjust one side and then the other side would be too tight and adjust that one, and then the one that I just adjusted is too loose now, so I kind of had to jump back and forth a lot. I think what helps is to kind of adjust both of them at the same time. The valve covers were kind of sitting for a while. I wish I had a better place to put them, but I decided to try to clean them up as best as I could, get all the gunk out, wipe them down. And the gasket kit that I bought was actually pretty clutch. It came with a lot of the stuff that I need, but I would say if I had to do this again, I'd buy a better kit. I wish I did a better job on is the spark plugs. The owner previously put AutoZone spark plugs in, which big no-no for me. I'm kind of weird on spark plugs, but while replacing them, one of the washers actually got stuck in the cylinder or the spark plug hole, and that was a big moment for me because I did not want it to fall inside the motor, because then I would have to redo everything. So big pivotal moment there. Kind of annoying that I didn't do this before, but it works. The timing belt was a pretty interesting one, and I don't know why I struggled with this so much, but I guess it was just me not thinking too far outside the box. So the way I ended up getting this belt in was the pulley with the teeth on it. I ended up loosening that and removing one of the idler pulleys, and it made this job so much easier. And with this timing belt, if it's a new belt, it actually comes with marks on it, timing marks, so that actually helps a lot knowing if you're timed properly, because even though everything like kind of lined up, you could be out of time just ever so slightly. So, and then if you do loosen these bolts up, I highly recommend you going back and double checking the torque specs, because I ended up doing this. I did it off camera, but that's something that you're going to have to remember, because if you leave one of these bolts loose, it's catastrophic failure. So just something to note here. I was also reading in a couple places that turning the engine over twice to seeing if the timing marks line back up is a good way to tell that everything is in working order. It's also good to do this in practice. I mean, it's intuitive because you can actually tell whether or not you did something wrong on the inside if you've assembled everything correctly or incorrectly. So this is a good practice just in general, just to turn it over. I had to reuse the cover just because these things are weirdly expensive for some reason, and they come in 2 pieces, which is also another strange thing, and I did not feel like buying another one. If I had to do this again, don't wait until the last minute to put the oil pan back on. In the last video, I changed this because the previous owner used RTV and one of the Felpro gaskets. So I just bought a new Felpro gasket, cleaned it up, and put it back on. After I got to that point, what held up this build, quote unquote, was not having the rear main seal. It was a big oversight on my end. I thought that the rear main seal came in the gasket kit that I bought, which would make sense, you know, but it wasn't there, so I had to buy it separate and wait for it. I found this really innovative way to actually remove it. I don't know if anybody's done this, but I put one of these screws through it and pulled it out with a hammer. I don't remember if I've seen this somewhere or not, but this is how I decided to do it without damaging the bearing for the crankshaft or anything like that. So now putting the new rear main seal in, I've seen before that people use wood blocks to put it in, but unfortunately this crankshaft doesn't have a flat face in the back, and the edges are kind of beveled a little bit, so you're not going to be able to do that properly. So I kind of just started it here, and you'll see later on that I ended up, you know, while it was on the engine stand, I ended up re-tapping in the rear main seal to make sure that all the way around it was flush. What's really sort of strange about rear main seals is a lot of people make it sound like it's gonna be the end of the world. I mean, the seal is a pretty stout product. It's really hard to destroy it, and I would say as long as you have a consistent seal around the whole crankshaft, I think you'll be all right. I bought an extra one just in case, and I'm not even using an OEM one. I'm using the Felpro. The OEM one is actually my backup, so I wouldn't overthink it too much. The issue, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, but if you look, you can see there's a bit of damage to the condenser. While I was removing the engine, because the little shop that I have here is on an incline, when I separated it from the transmission, it actually hit the condenser and punctured a hole in it. So I ended up reordering a new condenser, but the condenser arm was in the way, so it didn't allow me to install it. And then I ended up taking a grinder and trying to cut off the support bracket, and ended up chopping off the place where the AC line is supposed to connect to. So I had a useless condenser. So what I ended up doing is, because I didn't want to spend $100 more on this, I ended up going to AutoZone or Advance Auto, getting a $6 epoxy. Everybody knows this is JB Weld, and I JB welded it, and it held. I have cold AC. Maybe it might leak a little bit, call the EPA, but so far I don't notice any change in the AC, so I'm happy. The hardest part, I would say, not even just putting everything together on the block, is actually taking the motor in and out and when you don't have a lift, it makes life so much more difficult. I mean, the issue that I previously mentioned is that this car right now is on a angle, so I'm almost having to try to sit the motor on the subframe and then try to push it up. What you won't see in this video is I actually ended up having to jack up the transmission so that it would allow me enough room to then bring the motor and push it in, because I was having a lot of alignment issues. This ended up taking about 2 hours to actually get this motor in. Sounds kind of extreme, but again, this space is beautiful, but it's not 100% ideal, especially the fact that it's actually pitched pretty dramatically one way. So I finally got everything in. Now I'm just putting the torque converter bolts back on, and this was like a very happy moment for me. I normally struggle with this. I'll put it to bed and then come back later on and put it back together, but I'm weird. When I get into a rhythm, I keep going, and I don't really want to stop, because I feel like the stopping kills the productivity, but I need to remember that sometimes stopping increases productivity. Something I'm still learning. So I made another very small error. So I was so excited to get this engine back in that I forgot to pre-run the wiring harness for the engine. So I ended up having to take off the entire intake manifold and run the wires and plug in all the sensors after, and that ended up becoming a pain later on, because you can kind of figure out where, you know, all the plugs go in, just because of a lot of them are shaped very uniquely, but the length of all the cables are kind of the biggest thing. I don't know why they made it so short, but they did, and it ended up taking a lot longer than I wanted. So previously I had done a video about fixing my AC on this car, and it's been a journey with this AC. I replaced the compressor clutch, which was an interesting activity, and you know, it seemed to solve the AC issue, except for the fact that eventually it would go, you know, it would go hot again. So I ended up getting the AC serviced by a shop, and they told me, yeah, you know, the AC serviced, and then it ended up going hot again. So come to find out, the Schrader valve on the low pressure line was actually bad. So I figured this out after I recharged the system, and this is why I have trust issues. If I take the car to a shop who's servicing the AC, they should change the Schrader valve. It's not like it's this crazy part. I mean, I bought this whole kit that's probably good for the next 20 years off Amazon, and I'm doing it myself. It literally took 30 seconds to change the Schrader valve. I mean, it's not that difficult, but when I used to work at Valvoline, I actually would do AC services, and that was a common thing that I would change all the time. So putting in oil in the car was a milestone that I greatly appreciated, but a lot of this at this point I was kind of terrified, because I was worried that, you know, after all this work, is the car gonna start? Is the car gonna work? Then, as you see the coolant draining, I ended up having a massive coolant leak at the radiator. The hose did not fit properly, so I had to reverse the hose, and so I lost like about a gallon of coolant. And then following that, how I lost another gallon of coolant is the hardware for the tightening clamps on the coolant line didn't work. So I had to replace it, which involved me taking off the coolant hose and getting soaked with coolant, which does not taste good. And if I had any recommendations about this, I would say if you are going to fill the car up with coolant, put maybe 1 gallon of coolant in there and check to see if the hoses are good. And I got really excited, and I realized I have an issue. So this is me checking right now, and I'm worried, and I can see that there's coolant leaking. So yeah, so to give you guys an idea on what this means to me, is finally being able to start the car is something that I dreamed of, and it seems that it might be stupid to some people, or it might not be a big accomplishment, but I would say anytime you do anything, you know, with your hands, giving your time to something and kind of diving into it head first and investing in it, it's gonna have a level of satisfaction. And I will say that for a lot of people, don't discredit and discount yourself. Give yourself credit about what you're actually doing and the things that you accomplish, big or small. And you know, it's ultimately a journey, and you're gonna have wins and losses along the way. For me, you know, this car was bought about 2 years ago, just after my son was born, and it was a family car for us. And part of that is the fact that, you know, we needed it at the time, and I bought it off a really good friend of mine at a really good deal. It needed some work, but I was willing to, you know, put in the work. And this is me at the very end here, taking on that monumental feat. So I will say it's kind of a beautiful journey. I mean, even in the recent year, this car's been down since September of last year, and it's now June. So you could see how this could make me feel very accomplished and complete. And the other big thing that I want to mention is the people that support you along the way, they have to take a big sacrifice as well. You know, all the countless days, hours spent away from the family, you know, putting in time building this is something you don't necessarily get back. So you have to know that it's gonna work out, right? So guys, again, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you guys for watching this video, and I'm really glad. If you made it to this point, you're a rock star, and I appreciate y'all. Thank you.